Well, in the history of the West, it's been a very interesting development in philosophy. We got to see part of that last week. What we actually saw was not all of philosophy. We got to see from about 1650, from about modernism, all the way up to postmodernism. So that's roughly, about 400 years, something like that, of history, of philosophy that we've gotten to, that we surveyed. And even then, we just surveyed some of the big ideas. We didn't get really to delve into other smaller philosophies, but still significant philosophies that developed along the way. Now, while many enjoy the quibblings of Western philosophy, of ontology, the study of being, and epistemology, the theory of knowledge, many in the West don't like that. They just don't like it. There's some people who just do not like philosophy. They do not like the quibblings, the language, the technicality of it. They're very turned off by it. And so what happens, or what's been interesting, is that you've seen this turn in people from Western philosophy to Eastern philosophies and Eastern religions. They avoid a lot of the philosophical drama. They tend to promote peace. They tend to promote tranquility and quietness of soul over the restlessness of the West. I mean, it's so much easier to have a quote, on a little calendar on your desk from the Dalai Lama or something like that, and to find peace and serenity in your wisdom and stuff like that, basically from there, than to read Immanuel Kant's, Critique of Pure Reason. If anybody hears, if you've ever read a philosophy book all the way through, they take a whole lot of time to say something that could have been said in a couple of sentences. Okay, they really do. I don't know why they do it that way. Either way, popular figures like the Dalai Lama or the Eastern Guru Deepak Chopra, they're sought as for means of life improvement. Basically, this philosophy stuff, that doesn't seem to be cutting it for me. Some people just can't handle the cognitive aspect of it, and so something like this Eastern wisdom seems to be a little bit easier. So in this survey of Worldviews, we're going to be examining three major Eastern religions. We're going to be looking at Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. And of course, we will be finishing with Christianity. This would be a complete and utter waste of a lesson if we did not finally make it into looking at what Christianity offers as a worldview. Okay, so by way of review, a worldview, according to James Sire, is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story or in a set of presuppositions, that is, assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, okay, which we hold either consciously or subconsciously, okay, either consistently or inconsistently, about the basic constitution of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live, move, and have our being. So all that to just say that a worldview, okay, is basically a lens that we look through to interpret all of life, okay? It's a lens that colors everything that we see. It's a grid that we look at and interpret every fact and every experience through. Recall, okay, the set of questions that we're using to discern these worldviews are right up here. These come from James Sire, his book, The Universe Next Door. The questions are as follows. One, what is prime reality? That is the really real. This will usually answer the God question. Okay? What is it that makes up reality? What's behind everything? What is the really real? Okay? Question two, what is the nature of external reality? That is, what is the world around us? Okay? What is the world around us? Essentially, what are we living in? Are we just brains in a vat connected? Hooked up to some sort of machine? Are we human batteries, sitting in some big tower in the Matrix, creating a power source for machines, What is a human being? Okay, is question number 3. Question 4, what happens to a person at death? Okay, so these are the big questions. What happens to a person at death? Question 5, why is it possible to know anything at all? This is the knowledge question, epistemology. Question 6, how do we know what is right and wrong? This is the moral question, ethics. Question number 7, what is the meaning of human history? To put it like Creed put it, what's this life for? Okay? There you go. What's this life for? Where's it all going? Where's it been? Where's it headed? And question number 8. What personal, life-orienting core commitments are consistent with this worldview? I've put it up here as basically this. What is the good life? What does it mean to, in a sense, to live the good life according to whatever worldview that we're looking at? Okay, what are the core commitments? How should a person live in light of what they believe about their worldview? Yes.
Now, these questions relate to Christianity. Is that correct?
These are just kind of a framework for understanding worldviews. So they're not necessarily, in a sense, directly toward Christianity. They're questions that, in order to have what constitutes a worldview, that every religion or philosophy should answer.
So you're generalizing, right?
This is just like the framework.
Yeah.
And so a religion or a worldview will fill in their answers to these different questions. Okay? All right, so let's begin with Hinduism, the journey to the one is what I've kind of subtitled that up there. It should be on your notes. By the way, on your notes, I filled in some information you'll see there. Okay, on each of the different things, there is some vocabulary, especially when we get to Islam. You guys will be learning Arabic. I don't know Arabic, but there are some Arabic words that are helpful to know, okay? All right, so Hinduism. Officially, Hinduism claims no particular founder. Okay, its origins go all the way back to the Indus River Valley, okay, in India. Though there's no official date of origin, the oldest writings of Hindu authority, that is the Upanishads and the Vedas, they go back to as late as 1200 BC. Okay, they go back to as late as 1200 BC. Now, roughly 80% of India is Hindu. 80% of India is Hindu. Hinduism claims to have about 900 million followers worldwide, making it the third largest religion in the world behind Christianity and Islam. Okay? It is the third largest religion in the world, right behind Christianity and Islam. Now, I should point out that the components of a worldview do not fit so easily into the various components that James Sire mentions here. That is, we have to understand even this construction of a worldview comes from a worldview. Okay? It itself comes from a worldview. It comes from a Western philosophical worldview. That's where worldview all started. It was the Germans that got us all started in worldview thinking. Okay? The German idealists. So a lot of the questions, when the East gets asked these questions, Eastern philosophy and Eastern religion doesn't recognize a lot of these categories. So some of the answers that the East offers may not fit exactly in here, and I've done my best to at least kind of see how they would frame it in there, or how a Westerner would understand it, I should say. Okay, but if you ask an Easterner, in a sense, how do you know right and wrong? We'll get to see a Hindu or a Buddhist would go, there is no right and wrong. Okay, they would tell you that, basically. Okay, we'll understand why in just a bit. Okay, as we begin to see, Eastern thinking has an entirely different emphasis on ontology, that is, on the study of being, and epistemology and ethics. Listen to this long quote. It says, "It is rather difficult to answer the question, what is Hinduism? It is a fellowship of faiths. It is also a federation of philosophies. It provides food for reflection for the different types of thinkers and philosophers all over the world. All sorts of philosophy are necessary. What appeals to one may not appeal to another, and what is easy for one may be difficult for another. Hence the need for different standpoints. All philosophies of Hinduism are points of view. They are true in their own way. They take the aspirant step by step, stage by stage, till he reaches the acme or the pinnacle of spiritual glory." That comes from a book called All About Hinduism. You can find that online for free. It's in PDF form. Okay, I believe you just type in Hinduism PDF on Google, you should be able to run across it. It's about 183 pages long if you've got a printer, or if your workplace doesn't mind you using theirs, right? You can find that. It's by a man named Sri Swami Sivananda. Okay, I'm pronouncing that in a Mexican way, right? That's horrible. Okay, but with this in mind, okay, Westerners tend to associate Hinduism as pantheistic monism. So this is how we would understand it, okay, as pantheistic monism. Now, monism is the belief that reality is fundamentally one thing. Okay, if you remember last week, I mentioned that the biggest problem in philosophy, in the history of philosophy, has been the problem of the one and the many. Is the universe fundamentally one thing, or is it fundamentally many things? And philosophy has always done a big swing. Well, it's one thing over here, but no, we need to go to the plurality, and philosophy's just swung back and forth. Postmodernism, we said, was an emphasis on plurality, and modernism was an emphasis on unity, in a sense, on oneness or on sameness. Okay? Now, pantheism. Pantheism is the belief that God and the world are identical. Okay? Pantheism is the belief that God and the world are identical. So when we say that Hinduism is pantheistic monism, they believe that the world and everything in it is all created of the same thing. It's all God. Okay? It's all God. Are they going to tell it to you that way? No, you're going to hear it a little bit differently when you ask them. Okay? But there are many strains of Hinduism, but hopefully, in a sense, it's the basics that hold them all together that will help us to understand Hinduism as a whole. Okay? So in answering their first question, what is ultimate reality? Okay? According to Hinduism, ultimate reality is summed up in Brahman. Okay? Brahman. Let me write that for you guys here. Okay? Brahman. Now, in some variations of Hinduism, the ultimate reality is Brahman or Vishnu. Okay? That is an A. Yeah, B-A-A. Okay? Now, this ultimate reality, it can be called Vishnu, which sometimes a lot of people, that's one of the more popular names, in a sense, for the god of Hinduism, but Vishnu is just an expression of Brahman, okay? Vishnu is the sustainer and defender, or Shiva. There's another popular, in a sense, god or expression of God in Hinduism. Shiva is a destroyer and recreator, okay? But Brahman is the essence or the soul. Now, they don't use the term soul, okay, so I'm just kind of, I'm using, that's what will help us understand it. But it's the essence or the soul of the cosmos, okay? Brahman is the essence or the soul of the cosmos. It is the absolute reality, the only reality, so there you can sense the monism, the idea that it's only one thing, okay? The only reality in the sense that there is nothing independent of him. So if you look, in a sense, this is what they believe reality is like. If this circle represents everything that exists, God and the world exist in that same category. Okay? God and the world exist in that same category. I guess you could kind of, if kind of following the analogy with the circle around it would be the essence or the soul that holds everything together. Okay? God is, the absolute reality is, it's sometimes described as the vast expanse, so this is some of their terminology. The supreme self, pure existence, pure consciousness, and the pure bliss. God, in this view, he is the infinite and impersonal ultimate reality. Okay, God is impersonal. Okay, God is all that exists. Nothing exists that is not God. That's from one of their, that would kind of sum up pretty much what they believe about ultimate reality. God is all that exists. Nothing exists that is not God. That chair that you're sitting in, guess what? It's got a little bit of God in it, right? Yeah. So this kind of makes sense, because we in the West, we think, they have temples where people drink out of bowls and dishes and things like that where they've got rats and mice running around all over the place. And it's like sacrilegious to harm any of those animals. We've heard about, right, the sacred cows. We even use that idea here in the West, for things that shouldn't be touched. That's where that comes from, because there is, in a sense, divinity within those animals, according to their belief. If all that exists is Brahman, okay, then there is an aspect of God in every single thing that exists.
But how come when they won't eat just that? Like, if everything is God, corn is God. Why would it be corn?
You got to eat somehow. No, like they won't. I know that they won't eat certain things. They won't eat certain things. If I understand correctly, they won't eat meat. They won't eat meat. They'll have like chicken and things like that, but beef is off limits. That I understand beef is off limits, but everything else is. So I know, right? I'm just like, nope, ribeye, nope, no, thank you.
But that doesn't make sense. Like, if everything is God and that has God.
Well, so in their view, I think I mentioned it later, but in their view, there are gradations of being. This is one of the things that they would say, that there are gradations of being. It's kind of similar if you've ever studied. It's kind of similar to some Greek ideas, in particular in the Christian church, the heresy of Gnosticism. That in Gnosticism, you get this idea that there exists pure spirit. So this is where you can kind of see the Greek. And the further that you get away from pure spirit, you tend toward the material. Okay? But there are these intermediate beings in this view that were angels, and in Gnostic thinking, Jesus Christ is one of these emanations from pure spirit. Okay? And God, the God of the Old Testament, because he creates the material world, God, in their view, is evil, because material is evil. Okay? So you can see a lot of common thinking that the material is evil and the spirit or the soul is good, with some of the Eastern religions and with some of the Greek thinking, even in the West. You kind of get hints of that. But they would answer that I remember correctly, they would answer that there are gradations of being from Brahman.
Do they believe in reincarnation? Like,
Yeah.
why is a cow sacred?
Yes.
Reincarnation of
Yeah,
animals, but not plants. That's we can eat plants.
Yeah, they do believe in reincarnation. So hopefully some of those questions will get answered. Ultimately, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them. Okay, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, but I mean, at some point, I mean, the religion has to be practical, But in one sense, too, you can almost see it. Well, if everything is God, we're just putting God. We're not really destroying anything. We're putting, in a sense, it becomes kind of like a circle of life sort of thing, and God's just sustaining Himself. So they can be answered that way.
Certain spokesmen for their religion, like the Catholic has to post the Hindu, who decides who can speak for their religion.
Well, they don't have like all their religion isn't summed up in one expression. So like Hinduism, it's a plurality of faiths all under one umbrella. That's what it is. So Hinduism is religious pluralism, basically. They accept everything because they believe since everything is one, that means all religions lead to the mountaintop, basically. In a sense, is kind of their understanding of it. So they're very inclusive. So even missionaries, they've noticed sometimes, they've gone into India, and I think this was more early. Like, I mean, we've gotten smarter now, right? But when they would first go in there, yeah, they accepted Jesus. That's awesome. What really happened was they included Jesus among all the other gods, and basically Jesus just became an avatar of Brahman, or became an avatar of Vishnu, just one way among many others. But it's now Christians are smarter now. Now they know that the challenge is not simply just to get them to accept Jesus, but to accept Jesus against all other gods as the only way, not one among many. And so there becomes the challenge, and even it's interesting too. Hindus get violent sometimes too, and Buddhists too. With Christian missionaries and with Christians in their areas sometimes. Over these things. But that's the real challenge, is to get them to see, that no, we're not saying Jesus is one among many, Jesus is the only. That's where it gets.
Or the Sikhs, a branch of Hinduism. The Sikhs.
Do what?
The Sikhs religion.
Yeah.
It's a branch of Hinduism.
Yes. Yeah, the Sikhs, and then like you have, in some of their other expressions, I believe the Brahmas, or like your higher priests or your higher caste and stuff like that. So they believe in the caste system, in that sort of way. So the higher you are, the closer you are to Brahman, the more spiritual authority in a sense that you have. But even then, I mean, you're kind of only an authority within your own little branch. You can't jump over and start crossing off that way. Part of the plurality, the idea, in a sense, what fosters Hinduism is that it's basically just let's all get along. We're all going to the same place anyway. That's kind of what helps it exist in so many ways. We're all going to the same place anyway. Let's just enjoy the ride there. Okay. The world exists. Okay, so the external reality. Okay, the world exists as part of this absolute and ultimate indescribable being. Human beings exist as part of Brahman. Okay, so one of the keys to understanding the Hindu view of humanity, and I've put it on your notes, is that Atman is Brahman. Okay? Atman is Brahman. Okay? Atman is the essence or the soul of any person. Okay? Atman is the essence or the soul of any person. It is the unmanifested ultimate reality, the essence or the principle of life, the state of human consciousness as the existing or living self. Basically, it's your real self is what they would call Atman. Okay? This real self transcends distinctions that we normally make within humanity, such as race, gender, species, religion, nationalities, etc. Okay? In the West, traditional humans, we divide ourselves into material and immaterial existence, right? Body and soul. Okay? Physical body and the soul, respectively. Hinduism makes the distinction. Okay, makes this distinction, but in Christian theology, the body is part of the soul. Okay, the body, in a sense, is part of our essential self. We are, in Christian thinking, we are a psychosomatic whole. We're not just a soul encased in a body. Okay, we're not a live body without a soul. Okay, in a sense, a pure animal in that sort of way. For Christianity, body and soul were meant to go together. Okay, in Hinduism, Atman, okay, the eternal and is the unchanging self. Hence, at the very core of our being, we are God. Atman, your soul, your essence, is Brahman. Okay? So that's what is meant by the phrase, Atman is Brahman. Now, does some of this start to sound familiar? In some of these books, these popular reading books that are out, The Secret and things like that you have a spark of the divine, you are God, you have potential, you have power, all these, really guru self-help books from the East. Do you see the empowerment behind them? Do you see the worldview behind these this sort of thinking? Now, if God is all that exists, okay, here becomes the question, right? Okay, what is the problem with the world that exists? Okay, in a sense, in Hinduism, well, what's wrong with the world? If everything is God, why isn't everything clicking together? Okay, what is the fundamental problem that keeps people from God? And there are two. The first one is called Maya. Okay, M-A-Y-A. Maya, that just means illusion. Okay? Illusion and ignorance keep us from the one. Illusion and ignorance keep us from the one. Now, Maya, these are the false distinctions of existence that we make. Okay, so I already kind of alluded to some of them earlier. Just within humanity, the Maya that exists within humanity, in a sense, would be race, gender, nationality, possibly even sexuality. We'd have to say that nowadays too. Okay? So basically, in a sense, a Hindu, when they look at in a sense, when people divide over race, over nationality, over gender, over you're a Cowboy fan and you're a Steeler fan or something like that, Hindus look at that and basically say that's Maya. That's an illusion. It's a false distinction. It doesn't really exist. And as long as that illusion continues to exist, there will continue to be strife. There will continue to be war and disagreement, and that will bring suffering, etc., etc. Okay?
So all this on our end is Maya.
Is Maya, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So that would be there. It's just Maya. Okay. When one understands that Atman is Brahman, so here's the knowledge, right? Because we're ignorant that Atman is really Brahman. Okay. When we understand that Atman is Brahman, these distinctions go away and are recognized as illusions that keep us from the one and attempt to divide us into the many. So you can see the rejection of plurality, in a sense, at least of an ultimate plurality, because they don't mind plurality as long as it all goes to the same place. But an ultimate plurality is rejected in Hinduism. Okay, so in a sense, let's look at it like in religions. In a sense, Christian versus non-Christian. A Hindu looks at that and says, "No, that's an illusion. We're all Christians." All right, you can hear that now. We've heard. Yeah, you've heard that before, right? You know, or we're all Hindu, or we're all Buddhist. We're all the same thing. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. Okay, so salvation.
So they don't like distinction, and yet they develop the caste system?
Yeah, well, that has to do. We'll get into how the caste system works later, because that's going to deal with something, in a sense, part of the morality within Hinduism, which is unique in and of itself, I think, in some ways. But anyway, salvation, in a sense, in Hinduism, is accomplished by becoming one with Brahman, which is achieved by transforming human consciousness. So basically, ridding yourself of Maya and ignorance. Okay, ridding yourself of Maya, illusion, and ignorance. Okay, this is a quote here. It says, "It believes that the Supreme Being may be approached through several paths." Okay, so here are the different. In a sense, these are different ways that different forms of Hinduism express their faith. There'd be something such as knowledge. Okay, that's one way to do it. Basically, just learn the doctrines and stuff like that. Okay, devotion. It's called bhakti. Okay, there is action, karma. Okay, that's the word for that, and yoga, physical control. Okay. Yeah, so the Supreme Being may be approached through several paths, such as knowledge is the first one. Devotion. Action, and the word that they use is karma there, okay, K-A-R-M-A.
So action produces karma?
Yeah. And yoga is the fourth one, okay?
Yoga?
Yoga, yeah. Physical control is what they would understand that there.
Oh, you mean in the mind? Or, well, no, it can't be because it's physical.
Yeah, so it'd be, the way that they perform their yoga, they perform different postures.
Oh, okay.
Different physical postures and stuff like that. Sometimes in the in the positions of some of the gods that they worship, in that sort of way.
Is the Supreme Being knowledge?
How they approach him. In a sense, these are the ways that Maya and ignorance are gotten rid of. Okay.
Okay. Now, you said knowledge. Devotion. Okay, what did you say before that? You gave an explanation or a definition?
Or just that the Supreme Being may be approached through several paths.
The Supreme Being
may
be approached
through
several paths.
Through several paths, and these would include knowledge, devotion, action,
What's the word they use?
and yoga.
What's the word they use for devotion?
For devotion, they use the word bhakti.
How you spell that?
B-H-A-K-T-I.
So any of these can get you to the
In a sense, yes, any of these or any combination of these also. Okay? Yeah, any of these or any combination of these.
I'm sorry. The Supreme Being may be
Approach.
Approach. Okay.
Yeah.
Real well. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay?
The Supreme Being is Brahman. Yes?
Brahman, yes.
Brahman. So
Yeah.
it's like how they're approaching him.
Yeah, and this quote is from Mahatma Gandhi's book called The Essence of Hinduism, which you can also find in PDF form on Google for free. It's about 213 pages, if I remember correctly. Okay, just type in.
Read it all?
No, I didn't read it all. I didn't have time to read all of it, but
surprised. I ain't gonna get into that right now.
The quote continues. It says, in fact, in actual life, the path trodden by a seeker may be a combination of two or more of these disciplines, depending on the choice of the individual in consonance with his temperament, aptitude, and attitude. So here's one of the other kind of cool things about Hinduism. It's basically religion suited to you. Okay? It's what it becomes. It's religion suited to you. You know, maybe you're a very quiet person. Well, hey, we've got meditation and yoga for you. You know, it's going to work out. You know, maybe you're a very astute, rigorous sort of person. Well, hey, we have learning and yoga for you, or, you know, something like that.
What about for Eric Mack?
For Eric Maxey, well, we're going to have a lot of devotion. To have a lot of devotion for Eric Maxey, and then we'll see where we go from there, brother. Now, the interesting thing about Hindu faith, then, is that Hindu faith is more about technique. Okay? It is very technique-driven rather than doctrinally driven like in the West. In the West, where do we put our faith? We put it in right belief. Okay? We have creeds, we have confessions, we have systematic theology, textbooks, and things like that. Okay? In the East, if we did that, and Hinduism calls it, it's a false distinction. It's Maya. So they emphasize more the technique. Okay, one of the things that they do a lot in their meditation, apparently it's proven, but in their meditation, they do make sounds and the chants, and perhaps, maybe when we were all younger, or maybe even to this day, right, we make fun of people who meditate and always going, but that OM noise, okay, apparently there's something really sacred about it. But apparently in Hinduism, there really is a connection with that sound, with the sound that it makes, the sound that it resonates, the words that can come out of that are sacred to them, that if they perform them correctly, that it should lead them, in a sense, down the path, getting them closer to the one, to realizing that Atman is Brahman, and that all these distinctions that they're making are really false.
So, question. You said technique.
Mm-hmm.
Now, correct? Too much technique cannot be that good. I mean, it's like me. If I focus, like when I'm doing my group, too much technique, that's not good. There's not a balance?
It probably depends, because since you can have a combination of all these different things, because like technique for knowledge could be something like, if you look at, in a sense, India, we get a lot of scholars and very hard workers, engineers, people who are very good with electronics and such. We get a lot of them from India. I remember when I was at Pan Am, there's a lot of Indian students there. Very smart, very bright. What are they exerting? They're exerting, in a sense, technique in knowledge, in the way that they do their work, in the way that they live out their life. So it starts to show there. So that's one kind of technique, but then there could be technique in devotion.
But when you say it like that, I see it different now.
Yeah, so in a sense, that's what we mean by technique, because there would be a technique, in a sense, for knowledge. There would be a technique for devotion, a technique even for action, in a sense, for the morals, as we'll start to see in a bit, and then the technique, in a sense, for yoga. So there in yoga, you can't just swimming dolphin technique, get it, nailed it. No, you really have to work at it in order to get, in a sense, the postures right.
Versatility sets in then, right? Versatility sets in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you practice over and over anything, it becomes easier.
Yeah. Yeah, so the technique is super important. In a sense, a lot of it is about especially with the rituals, it would be about getting the rituals right. Getting the rituals right. Yes.
What did it do? I went to house in Houston, and my tutor was Hindu, and he smelled like garlic. Did they do something with garlic?
I have no idea, and I'm not answering anything on that. I have no idea. Maybe he just ate pizza, it's Houston, it's America. I'm pretty sure they got great pizza around. So,
Maybe you needed to clean the mucus in your nose.
I will go no further than that, okay? Now, what do Hindus believe happens at death? Okay? Hindus believe in reincarnation. Okay? So the idea is that a person's Atman is just given another body. Okay? A person's Atman is just given another body. Now, this process of rebirths and reincarnations is part of what is called samsara. Okay? S-A-M-S-A-R-A, samsara. Okay? Which means journeying. Okay? It just means journeying. Now, Hindu morality comes into play here because karma becomes a factor. How many of you all have heard the song Karma by Alicia Keys? Anybody? Come on now.
I have. I don't even know. She can't.
Well, I know you're going to go YouTube it later now, right? Okay. But karma, karma is the retributive justice of the cosmos. Okay? It's the retributive justice of the cosmos. It is impersonal. Many here in the West tend to believe in this concept, especially when someone has done them wrong. Okay? And I don't have to remind you of the phrase that people say when they see somebody get it. Okay? I think we all know, we've heard it, okay? But the karma, it's basically the Eastern version of you reap what you sow. Karma is the Eastern impersonal version of you reap what you sow. The law of karma, this is a quote, says, the law of karma can be understood when compared to the law of cause and effect in the physical world. Basically, karma is the same principle applied to the moral world. Now, here's the trick with the whole process of reincarnation. When you can get your karma level to 0, okay, that's when you reach liberation. When you get karma level 0, okay, everybody goes in the negative. At some point, you're paying off what you owe, okay? If you owe, if you're like the lowest, that means you have the most karma debt, then you're in the lowest caste of society. But the more that you work off, when you reincarnate, you start to work your way up the caste system. And that just shows the caste system is just an indicator. It's not so much, I guess kind of answering this question, coming back to it, it's not so much a distinction, it's just an indicator of how close you are to the one. In that sort of way. It's just an indicator of how much Maya and how much ignorance you've gotten rid of. Okay? Now this brings up the rather difficult question of the subject of morality in Hindu worldview. Okay? Hinduism makes no claims to moral absolutes, but yet it clearly has morals which karma holds them accountable to. Okay? I don't know how to answer that. They just have these. They have these laws. There's no explanation that they're going to offer in a sense of where they come from or even what they are. Hindu morality is very situational. Okay, I guess their ethics could be just described as situational ethics. Okay, but Hindus follow what is called dharma. Okay, D-H-A-R-M-A. I think there's a show or a band or something named after that. Okay, Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a TV show, Dharma. Okay, Dharma. It's like law or religion or right actions. Keep that phrase in mind, right actions, because that's going to lead us into Buddhism in just a bit. Okay, but to act dharmically, this is a quote, says to act dharmically is in essence to act appropriately. Okay, now hear me reading it like this: to act appropriately. Okay, what is appropriate is determined by the context in which the action is to be performed and who is performing it. So in a sense, if you're in a lower rank of society, well, there's certain things that are allowable for you because, you can get away with certain things. But if you're the president, or something of that nature, there are things that you shouldn't do because in a sense it's unfitting for your person, for your office, or your calling, whatever you want to call it, in that sort of way for your vocation. So the ethics ultimately is situational, okay?
Question.
Yes.
How can it how do they determine what the castes are, what caste you're in?
I forgot, and I didn't include it so much in here because of space permitting. A lot of it is it's not something that we can determine. It's kind of just more like, well, where are you in life? It's kind of just more, well, okay, he's wealthy. That must mean that in his past life, he's did pretty well, so he came back in this life where he's at as wealthy.
So wealth is something that wouldn't fall under Maya then? Because race, gender, sexuality, but status doesn't fall under that?
Yeah.
They should, right?
Yeah, so part of it would be then how that person is living then in the situation that they're at. Because in a sense, and this when we get into the history, but history never goes anywhere. It's just cyclic.
Cyclic.
Yeah. It just keeps going this way and this way and this way. And I mean, hopefully if you get to the one, I guess you can spin out maybe or something, but if not, I mean, you could be in here, and part of the idea is that in Hindu belief, one of the gods, who is it, Vishnu, destroys the world and then just recreates it, just to start it over again. Very cyclic in that sort of way. So, I mean, a person can get to, they can go up and then, yeah, I made it. Oh, boom. Throw them back down. Yeah.
So a little different from, like last week we talked about self-actualization.
Yeah. Yeah, in a sense, this sort of self-actualization is to, in a sense, to realize that there is no self, that Atman is Brahman, in that sort of way. Yeah, complete total difference, okay? What is important to note is that one does good deeds in order to achieve unity with the one, but also to understand that all actions are merely part of the whole world of illusion. So this is something interesting as far as, when you ask them, how do you know right and wrong, that category themselves are part of Maya. Okay? So, I mean, this is where it just gets a little weird and hard to explain. That's why they don't concern themselves with these questions, really, in a sense. If you ask them what's right and wrong, you're really asking them a question that's foreign to their worldview. You'd be asking them a question that they would kind of just, like, based on their presuppositions on their worldview, they wouldn't know how to answer it, and they couldn't answer it. Their concern is not so much, in a sense, quote-unquote right and wrong, according to some standard. It's kind of just, well, what is the situation? Where are we at here? What is? In that sort of way. Buddhism will kind of bring this out a little bit more in just a bit, but there's no real, standards that they hold to. Maya. Yeah.
That would be Maya, right?
Yeah. So the cure, in a sense, the cure to all the world's problems. I mean, in a sense, you kind of have to look at the example of Mahatma Gandhi. You'd have to kind of look at his example, his example to the social injustice, in a sense of the West, as the West was pushing into his country. That's. Those were his actions, but yet he wasn't willing to take life. So they would just sit down. They would sit down, and they wanted us to all realize, that in a sense, that there is no distinction, in a sense, like between Christian and a Hindu. That Jesus Christ, according to him, was just as much Hindu as he was, and that the West shouldn't be oppressing Hindus, because of that. And until the West gets rid of their idea, their illusion, their Maya, the oppression's going to keep going. So that's the road that Hindus take. That's the road that they take.
Let me ask you a question. So anything that they don't understand is Maya. Is that correct? Is that false to them, or?
I don't think saying it that way, like anything that they don't understand. Maya tends to be more the divisions and the distinctions that we make, usually in particular, especially that lead to that just lead to division.
Yeah. Okay.
That lead to division and separation and plurality.
But yeah, they only include like race and gender, sexuality. Like, what about rich and poor? What about healthy and sick? Like, are the lepers like just cast out because they deserve that and it's not part of Maya? That's what I don't get. What categories fall under karmic justice and what fall under Maya? And how do they make that distinction?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able.
I
wouldn't be able to answer that. But karma. Karma wouldn't be, that I understand in their system, karma wouldn't be, in a sense, a false distinction. That would be part of what we deserve. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's just the way that they say it. It's what we deserve based on what we've done in that sort of way.
But so they like let's say I'm like impoverished. I was born in a really poor family and I'm super sick all the time. Like I get leprosy and I'm just like cast out on the streets. They wouldn't look at that as they would look at that as karmic justice, and I was reincarnated as that
Right.
because of stuff I've done in past
Mhm.
life. But if I was born, let's say, a gay man, like that's just Maya, and my sexuality shouldn't matter. So like
Probably, yeah. So the thing too with that then is that, in a sense, with the karma, they would probably, if I'm understanding correctly, each person in wherever they're at, in whatever caste they're at, you shouldn't look down on another caste, and you shouldn't look up in jealousy toward another caste either. In a sense, you should basically serve in your caste where you're at the best way that you know how, so that when you reincarnate, you can move up. But yeah, there shouldn't be a promotion of jealousy or superiority to look down on anyone. It's just that's where they're at, and that's where they're at, in that sort of way.
So do they feel in any way a sense of like need to help other people in lower castes?
Yes. Yeah, so they would do that because part of, in a sense, doing things that are good is going to be learning to do things selflessly. Because if you're doing things selfishly, you're not recognizing Brahman. You're only recognizing Atman, and you're not recognizing that Atman is Brahman. So in Brahman, if Atman is Brahman, that means I should be helping everything and everyone as much as I can. In that sort of way. So yeah, hopefully that clears up a little bit there.
The question that I asked, I don't know what I was thinking of, because that's not even relevant, what I just asked you, I don't know why it was dumb, in other words,
No, it clears up some stuff, though. It clears up stuff. So, I mean, these are interesting. These are new. I'm understanding a bit more as you guys are asking the questions. So this is helpful. I know you wanted to say something.
This is what ruined the rest of the Matrix films. I don't know if you watched them.
Yeah. This and Buddhism a lot. Yeah. This in Buddhism. If you got to see the Matrix, they're in there. Star Wars too, right? There's nothing but the Force. Get into that one later. No, I'm not going to rag on Star Wars because that's a sacred cow around here. Okay.
I'm glad I'm the only one here, so.
Did you say there's 800 million followers?
900 million. 900 million that they claim. Now, when it comes to knowledge, okay, and knowing what is true, there's no concern for it, since it would introduce distinctions. In a sense, again, there is no quote-unquote right, there is no wrong, there is no true, and there is no false. There just is.
Then how can knowledge be a method of obtaining Brahman?
So what is, in a sense, what is the one knowledge that basically that you need to know, that we're all one? And in a sense, living that out and applying it. So yeah. So also too, this is something that's just bigger. Knowledge in the West and knowledge in the East is completely different. Here in the West, the way that we demonstrate that we know something is we take a test, right? In the East, the way that you demonstrate that you know something is how you live. Okay, so I mean, you see this in the Bible too, right? I mean, Jesus, I mean, hey, if you don't do what I say, you don't really know me, and I don't know you either. So even in the Bible, you see that idea of how you know in Eastern, in Eastern thought and versus Western thought. Okay, that's completely different. Okay, history, okay, in Hindu thinking, I've already mentioned this, but just to go in order here, is cyclical with no real meaning. Okay, James Sire, he notes that the Eastern scriptures are filled with epigrams, parables, fables, stories, myths, songs, haiku, hymns, epics, but almost no history in the sense of events recorded because they took place in an unrepeatable space-time context. Okay?
Unrepeatable space.
Space-time context.
Can you explain that?
Yeah.
So in a sense, since history is cyclical in their view, they wouldn't concern themselves with writing about what happened in, let's say, 1200 BC on April, or whatever May, right? We're on May the 6th, 1200 BC. Why is this important? Yeah, why is this important when we're over here? We don't concern ourselves about this. We concern ourselves about where we're at. And so what is one thing that can transport an idea instead of history? Well, let's just tell a story, because a story can transcend time, right? I mean, this is part of the genius of the Bible too, right? Why do you think Nathan told a story to David too, right? That story can last a long time, okay? So, but they don't concern themselves in a sense with history versus the Gospels. I mean, you read the Gospels, they claim historical places, historical people, times. We can locate them within particular times and places in history, etc. Okay, but in Hinduism, there's no real concern for that. Okay, so what is the good life in Hinduism? What is the goal, basically? Essentially, as mentioned early, it's basically through engaging in certain techniques of ritual or physical or cognitive activities to draw us closer to the one ridding us of Maya and ignorance. Okay, so that is the good life in Hinduism. All right, let's go on to Buddhism. The path to emptiness. Buddhism was founded in India about 500 BC by a man named Siddhartha Gautama. Okay, as the story goes, Siddhartha was born in about 560 BC. He was born into a royal family that practiced the Hindu religion. Now, at the time of his birth, so get this, right, there was a prophecy that was given over him. Okay, there were charismatics back then. Okay. But the prophecy stated this. It said, if he stays at home, he'll be a great king. Okay? If he leaves home, he will be the savior of the world. So one day, Siddhartha, I think he was about a teen, about 16, 18, something like that. But he decides he wants to leave home, and he wants to just, go out and explore the world, see what life is like basically outside of the palace and the riches that he's been living in. He wants to go explore the world for himself. He wants to pull a Bruce Wayne and just take out of Gotham, okay? But he had 4 encounters that would change his life. He had 4 encounters. His first encounter was with an aged, decrepit-looking old man. Okay? With an aged, decrepit-looking old man. The second encounter was a man suffering from sickness. Man suffering from sickness. This third encounter was a corpse during a funeral procession. And the fourth was a monk who had succumbed to begging for food. A monk who had succumbed to begging for food. Now, each of these experiences made the reality of suffering real to Siddhartha. Okay, I mean, basically, he's a very sheltered and pampered teenager at this point. And he decides to step out of his walls and see what life is really like for everybody else. What intrigued him, interestingly enough, was the monk. The monk, even though the monk is begging for food and all the other realities of suffering, in a sense, the suffering of age, okay, bodily suffering, the suffering of death, and the suffering of need. Okay, these are all the things that struck at him here. Okay, but it was this monk that kind of threw him, in a sense, for a loop, because in the midst of suffering, this monk still had a sort of tranquility about him. So even though he was begging for food, this monk apparently wasn't destroyed by his situation and suffering. He was still kind of able to live within it. Siddhartha left his riches to become a beggar and to find wisdom. Basically, he wanted to find what it was that drove this monk. I don't know that he ever ran into the monk. I'm not sure on the records on that, or if he learned from him or whatever. But he wanted that kind of life. He tried asceticism. Basically, you deny and beat your body and all that kind of stuff like that. Okay. He tried that, but that didn't work out. And apparently, one day while meditating under a tree, he finally had his breakthrough when he reached the highest level of consciousness that is known as nirvana. No, he didn't hear nirvana, okay? He didn't hear Teen Spirit, and it smells like Teen Spirit or anything like that, okay? Those of you Nirvana fans out there, right? Okay? Nirvana, okay, this highest level of consciousness just means nothingness. Nothingness. Okay? And after this, basically after his enlightenment, he became known as Buddha, which means the enlightened one. Okay? The enlightened one. Now, Buddhism is similar to Hinduism. Okay? I mean, it came right out of it. Okay? In a few ways regarding techniques to reach their view of nirvana, they do meditation. Okay? Buddhists do meditate. All right? As Buddhism spread, there was a split within that led to the development of at least two strands of Buddhism. One is called Mahayana Buddhism, okay, and the other one is, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Theravada, okay, or Theravada Buddhism, okay. Now, Mahayana Buddhism taught that enlightenment was available for everyone, right? These are the reformers of Buddhism, right? Okay, that enlightenment is available for everyone, okay. The Theravada branch basically taught that enlightenment was only for the committed few, okay. I didn't research this part, but I imagine this would, in a sense, be nirvana is only in a sense for the monks, for those who are totally devoted to it. Okay, in a sense, it kind of ranks it up. Enlightenment is only basically almost for like a priestly or a sort of religious kind of class. Mahayana Buddhism would say, no, normal people can find it too. Okay, normal people can find it too. You don't have to go live in a monastery someplace in order to find enlightenment. Okay. Now, for Buddhism, ultimate reality is not spoken in positive terms, such as the one, like we had in Hinduism, but rather they say, in a sense, the closest that they would describe it as is it's the void. Okay, the void. That is, the void is nothing that can be described or anything that can be named. Right? They won't even say that it's nothing, because nothing is still a word and still conveys a concept, and therefore nothing is still something. So even that doesn't describe what they mean by what ultimate reality is. Okay, so accordingly, it cannot be called. It cannot even be called nothing. Okay, I already got that there. But we need to say that they don't believe in a God per se. Okay, they don't believe in a personal God or anything like that. Buddhism tends to be more of a philosophy rather than any sort of religion that is a theistic form of religion in some form of way. Okay. Another difference is what it means to be human. Okay, in Hinduism, Atman is Brahman. Okay, so that the human being is an emanation of the ultimate reality or God. Okay, in Buddhism, however, the individual person is not a soul. Okay, the individual person is not a soul. There is no transmigration of the soul in reincarnation. So they still believe in reincarnation, but they don't believe in the transmigration of the soul. That is, that you just reincarnate as the same Atman in some other body. Okay, what they believe basically is your essence, whatever they call it, is basically just absorbed into the unity of everything. Okay, and basically a new person is completely formed out of that material. So the material that makes up a person, okay, they call it the 5 aggregates, okay, or existence factors, okay, and they are body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Okay, yes. Body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. So the idea is, in a sense, is when you die, those 5 aggregates, okay, or those 5 existence factors for a human being, they just get reabsorbed basically into the big canister of all that stuff that exists, and it just outputs a completely new person someplace else. Okay? That's what it does. It just outputs a completely new person someplace else. So, I am Moses. If I were to die, I would reincarnate as somebody else, something completely different, a totally new person. Okay? Now, how does one achieve salvation or enlightenment? Okay, so we don't want to call it salvation, but enlightenment in Buddhism. Okay, first there are the 4 noble truths, and I do have these on your notes there. Okay, the first one listed there says everything in life is subject to suffering and frustration. Okay, this is what the Buddhists call dukkha. Okay,
And is this like according to the Mahayana or the
this is Buddhism just in general. Okay, every branch of Buddhism will have these. Okay, yeah. In a sense, the Mahayana and the Theravada distinction is just, well, who can live these out to actually achieve enlightenment in that sort of way. Okay, so yeah, everything is subject to suffering and frustration. Basically, all life is suffering. Okay, there's point number 1 about Buddhism. All life is suffering. Okay, 2, the cause of this suffering is desire. Okay, which they would say is craving, lust, attachment to people and things, and even to self. I want to throw this apologetic point in for you all. That is what we Christians call idolatry. In the New Testament, one of the words for idolatry, is the word over desire, epithemeo. Okay, so I want you to kind of see a connection that you can have to reaching Buddhists. When they say that this is part of the problem of life, a Christian can say, yes, you're right, and we call those things idols. Okay? Very, very interesting point. I think that they give you a platform to stand on. Take it. Okay? We can agree with them on that point. You take it and you press them. I mean, in one sense, the idea would be to press them to say, the only way to get rid of that is not by inserting your desire to be free from desires, but with Christ is the only way that you can really conquer these over desires. Because if desire is the real problem, it's like, well, what about your desire to get rid of desires? How are you going to get rid of that desire? It's like, wait a minute now. Now, interestingly enough, though, but because, in a sense, because of the influence of Hinduism, Buddhism, especially like Zen Buddhism, they don't think in terms of logic. They reject that as a category. Part of it, in a sense, part of the idea, in a sense, of unifying or becoming enlightened is to get rid of logical distinctions that exist in the mind. And so like in Buddhism, this is where you get all these interesting sayings. What is the sound of one hand clapping? What is the sound of one hand? And you just sit there and you got to think about it until you can come to the realization that the sound of one hand is the sound of one hand. Okay, basically, we call that a tautology, right? But basically, till you can realize these things, and so, you might get these weird, interesting sayings from Zen Buddhists, especially.
So
okay?
it's kind of complex.
It gets kind of complex, yes. Okay? Point 3. To escape from suffering, we must destroy all desires and craving, break all attachments. Insert the conversation between Yoda and Anakin Skywalker, all right? Suffering I sense in you. Okay? Get rid of it. Yeah, did I just sound like Yoda? Whatever. Anyway. But, there's the Buddhism that comes out in Star Wars. This is part of the Jedi Code. See, I didn't see any of that Star Wars. Man, you're behind, man. I don't know how you're going to catch up, man.
There is a book where a writer took a more Christian standpoint on it.
I think I know which one you're talking about. Something of the Jedi, right?
Yes.
I saw it. I never picked it up, and I wanted to because I was like, there's got to be redemption for Star Wars somewhere. I don't want to abandon it to Buddhism. I need to check that one out.
Geek.
I know. I'm bored. All right, so how do we do this, right? How do we escape from suffering? The way to do that is through the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path. What is the Eightfold Path? I've got that on there for you as well, okay? Right belief, right intention, right speech, right action, and I've listed, in a sense, this is their list of morals that they have. Kill no living thing, do not steal, commit adultery, lie, take drugs, or drink intoxicants. Okay? Kill no living thing. That includes animals. Okay? In particular, usually animate things, okay? Not plants, stuff like that. That's why a lot of Buddhists are really vegetarians. Okay? A lot of strict Buddhists are vegetarians. Okay? They really won't eat a lot of meats. They might if it was roadkill, maybe because they didn't kill it. But they themselves probably won't kill it. And so you see like a lot of Buddhists try to live in harmony with everything around them. Ace Ventura, right? Anybody? Ace Ventura 2? I have yet to achieve intergalactic oneness. There it was. That's what he was trying to live out. I know, right? This is horrible. Oh, man.
You know what? On the Eightfold Path, I've been on that path except for one thing. So I have to drop mine down to Sevenfold Path. Because number 4, it says lie. Now, I've told some white lies and some black lies. I've told some Eric lies. I'm out. But other than that, I feel, seriously, that I've, been on that path.
Well, here's the thing, okay? There is no sin in Buddhism, technically. It's a path, so a lot of it is a series of trial and error and repetition. But in a sense, the idea of a path, and I know this from my Kung Fu years, right? The idea of a path is it's something that you do over and over and over and over again. Basically, it's small steps that you take that the summation of the steps that you've taken are basically, in a sense, where you're going to be. in that sort of way. I mean, you kind of have the same idea in a sense in the Bible. Life is described as a walk, as a path. I'm thinking of Psalm 1 here, right? Blessed is the man who walks not in the path of the wicked, in that sort of way, that kind of idea. It's the steps that you take that ultimately get you where you go. Okay? So they describe it as a path, but there's technically no sin. So, I mean, if you broke one of these, it's not like you're going to suffer damnation. The idea is just, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get to enlightenment. That's basically their idea. So there's no idea of sin or wrath that you're going to face, or even, you shouldn't even feel shame or guilt in a sense, in that sort of way. Technically, I know, right?
Get outside.
I know. I was just about to say that's part of the attraction in a sense of this is you don't have to, because in a sense these aren't so much law in a sense like the law of God. You're not going to get punished in a sense by breaking some of these. If you hurt people, though, well, you've got karma still. You still have things like that, but as I understand, they don't have like a sort of caste system. Karma will catch up with you just someplace in this life. They don't have a caste system because we don't reincarnate as the same person.
That's too easy.
So, kind of is, right? Yeah. It just depends how bad do you want the enlightenment, and that'll depend on how strict you live this out.
Yeah.
That's what it'll kind of come down to in that sort of way. So then right livelihood, okay, and a lot of the livelihood is simplicity. Here, this one would be not stocking up riches. Probably be hard to be a rich Buddhist because you're craving money. That'd be a pretty big contradiction in terms. Okay? Right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Now, these are essentially the morals of the Buddhist worldview. Okay, and essentially these are lived out under three categories. That is, you can kind of narrow these down under to gaining wisdom. Okay, gaining wisdom.
All 8 of these?
Gaining
wisdom. Okay.
Yeah, they're gaining wisdom, living morally, and meditating. Okay, that's the summation of Buddhist living. Gaining wisdom, living morally, and meditating. Now, one Buddhist put it this way. Okay, he said all three happen simultaneously. In order to meditate effectively, we need to behave correctly. In order to behave in a morally right way, we need wisdom to see clearly the appropriate behavior we must manifest. For example, if I rob banks, I will be too edgy to meditate. If I don't settle down to meditate, I won't open my mind to gaining the wisdom to stop robbing banks.
So don't go there.
So don't go there, yeah. So in a sense, you can kind of just jump in anywhere on this circle, right? And I'm going back to all my Kung Fu training because I can see how it worked in there. But you can jump in at any point in this circle. So if you start meditating, that should get rid of, let's say, daily problems of anger, anxiety, okay? If you have anxiety, maybe you can jump into gaining some wisdom. Well, what does it gain me, to be worried about something that I have no control over? Well, I should think about meditation, and then it leads, in a sense, to right living. In a sense, you can kind of see some of this influence. Well, I don't want to say this influence, but the same kind of parallel idea in Christianity. Right thinking leads to right living. You see this in the epistles, right? Paul says, he talks about, in a sense, the gospel declaratives, what we are in Christ, how we should now think about ourselves. And then he says, now, in light of all these, put off anger, malice, jealousy. Right thinking should lead to right living. Okay, you just kind of you kind of jump right in on one of those. Okay, now Hindu meditation was focused on techniques and repeating mantras. Buddhist meditation will still repeat some mantras. Okay, Buddhists, interestingly enough, will kind of pray too. Okay, they don't pray to a god, but they pray too. They say prayers. Okay, but Buddhist meditation, okay, the idea is to empty the mind. Okay. It is to empty the mind of all analytical thought, for ultimate reality is not only non-being, it is also what they call no mind. Okay? No mind. That's a mind that does not analyze what it grasps, but only what is. Okay? So does that sound familiar, in a sense, from Hinduism? Huh? No, it's from Hinduism too. It's the same thing. It's there is no right and wrong. There just is. For Buddhism, that's the idea of emptiness too. It's not dividing stuff into our minds. Okay, it's just working with what is, quote unquote.
Question.
Okay, yes.
Sorry. You said that. Oh my goodness. I lost it.
Okay. Well, so here's an example. So when I was taking Kung Fu and even instructing martial arts, the worst students, and it's kind of funny, right? Because in the West we say that the best students are the ones that ask questions. In martial arts, the best students are not the ones that ask questions. They're the ones who just do it. The ones who just do it, who just get it done. You get that person. Well, what if I go in at this angle? And what about this time? And you're just like, oh my gosh, you're missing it. Just do it. Just do the action. Just do it. And that's the idea of no mind. Has anybody ever seen Last Samurai with Tom Cruise? You seen that? Do you remember his problem when he was in the training camp, or not in the training camp, but when he was held in the village, and it's going to be winter soon, he can't go anywhere, so whatever. But he sees the guys training with the sword, and he starts training eventually, right? But what do they tell him that he's doing? Do you remember? Too many mind. They tell him, my guy, too many mind. Okay, he's got too much mind in his, he's thinking about it too much. In a sense, he's running the process like, well, what if this, what if that? And it's like too much mind, too much clutter. Okay, and it's not until he's in the alley and finally no mind, and it just happens. He doesn't have to think about the action. He just does it. He just performs it.
Let me ask you, because I remembered that question. The Buddhists, you said that they pray, but who do they pray to? Can you answer that question? I
can't. I don't know if it's just more of an expression of like a will or something of that sort of way, because they profess to not believe in any sort of personal God in that sort of way. So they don't believe that anything personal or anyone personal is behind ultimate reality. So prayer, it would seem probably more to function for themselves rather than that their petition is going to bring about change in the world or to bring about a different reality.
So it's a waste of time.
And from a Christian perspective, it would be, from their perspective, it would just be a way, in a sense, of either expressing and releasing and getting rid of desire, in that sort of way. So it has a function for them that Christians that we don't look. It makes no sense for us to hear that they pray,
and they don't pray,
and there's nothing, no one out there.
Okay.
So that one sounds a little different. No, Buddha. In fact, Buddha. We shouldn't think of Buddha as a person. And so this is another thing too. I've heard a statement. I heard it clarified a little bit, but I heard a statement one time about Buddhist history, and their kind of rejection of history. If you ever see the Buddha on the road, kill him. Part of the idea behind that, at least as I first heard it explained, is that one, the Buddha himself is an illusion. Okay. So, and the other thing too, the other aspect of that is if you ever see the Buddha on the road, kill him. The idea is that if you ever claim to be enlightened, keep going, because that probably means that you aren't. And so it's an interesting thing, because you see how it keeps you locked in a cycle. When you think you're there, nope. You think you're there, nope. And it just keeps you going and searching and searching. In fact, if you guys have ever seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, there's an older movie there.
You watch a lot of movies.
I know this is horrible, but it helps me to understand these concepts very well.
No, I'm not the one.
But the main character, man, I forgot his name. Something Limu Bai. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Now, technically, yes. So, he comes back after a long spiritual journey, and he basically says that he reached emptiness, according to him, and that it wasn't what he was, or anything that his teacher told him it was, and et cetera, et cetera. And he kind of just wanted to reject that life and come back for love. Right, there you go, the ultimate story. Okay. Now the good life in Buddhism. Okay, the good life in Buddhism. All right, it's basically the Four Noble Truths and following the Eightfold Path. Okay, basically that's the path, day after day after day And so you can kind of see how this plays into, in a sense, the culture. Repetition. Repetition becomes very ordinary. In fact, I mean, in Japan, I mean, you look at Japan. Japan is very Buddhist culture. You look at the lives that they live. They're not like us. I mean, we get very impatient, and we want things that are out of the ordinary. We even make up cartoons like The Incredibles, right? I saw it the other day with the kids at school. And what are you waiting for? I don't know, something incredible. But in a sense, in this kind of lifestyle, it's the ordinary, the repetition. You keep going and you keep doing, and you just keep walking the path. Part of it, in a sense, part of what Kung Fu is, right? Hard work, time and energy. That's what the characters literally translate to, is time and energy. You, in a sense, you become what you do. Over and over and over again. You become what you do. If you...
What's the point again? Can you remind me?
To reach the stage of enlightenment. That's it. In a sense, it's to escape suffering. It's to escape suffering.
But why even try if you're just going to be born with someone else who suffers? Like...
YOLO, I guess.
You only live again and
Well, these are going to be part, in a sense, from our worldview, these are part of the deeper absurdities. In their worldview, they don't see it. They don't see that as a problem, because in a sense, the idea for them, in a sense, is the moment. It's the moment. And I mean, okay, here's another movie. Let's see if anybody's seen it, right? Oh goodness, what's it called? It's a Jet Li movie. Oh, I don't even remember the name of it now. He comes back as Chen Zhen.
Just look at him. He'll know.
Right? He comes back as it's a Bruce Lee remake. He comes back. His master's been killed in poison. He comes back, Chen Zhen. He's got to fight this Japanese karate master.
Oh, with the military outfit?
Yes.
Lord have
You
mercy.
know. That's
my proof when I told you earlier. I was in the martial arts.
You see, there you go. So there's a part in the movie. I know it's horrible.
Do I need to explain? I'm in the wrong room.
There's a part in the movie where Jet Li explains. He's trying to explain, in a sense, his kung fu philosophy to the Japanese master, and he tells the master, it's about the moment. It's about focusing all your energy on one point in time. And he gets a brick, and he breaks the brick right out of his hand like that. But that's, in a sense, that's part of the Buddhist philosophy lived out there. It's about the moment. So it's not thinking what lies ahead. If I think that way, that brings suffering. Don't want to do that. Don't want to do that. Okay? So everything is very focused on the moment. So here, I mean, in a sense, within the Eightfold Path, you can kind of see it's very situational too. Right living, right action, right concentration, that sort of thing. Okay? All right, that's Buddhism. Okay? That's Buddhism. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. Really interesting. Okay? Let's